Thanks for staying with us. A sound relationship between Nigeria and the African Development Bank is yielding results with the inauguration of AFDB Nigeria's Country Department building in Abuja on Thursday. Reading out the implications of the milestone for the bank, the president, Dr. Adeshina, speaks on the AFDB's investments in Nigeria and other opportunities in the bank's largest members' economy.
This building, Your Excellency, has a unique importance. It is the first time that the African Development Bank has built an office complex outside its headquarters in Abidjan since its inception in 1964. It is therefore wonderful that the bank's first ever purpose-built building will find home in Nigeria, for we must give honor to whom honor is due. After all, Nigeria is the largest shareholder of the African Development Bank. I'm delighted to welcome you, Mr. President, represented by Mr. Vice President, to these impressive new premises of the African Development Bank, your bank. Your accepting, Mr. Vice President, to commission this building is such a great honor for us at the bank, and we are most grateful to you. Nigeria was at the forefront of the creation of the African Development Bank in 1964. So the marriage partnership between Nigeria and the bank is now 54 years old. And you will agree with me that without any doubt, a marriage of 54 years is certainly worth celebrating. The African Development Bank strongly supports Nigeria and always will. You can tell by the level of our investments in Nigeria to the tune of $6 billion US. From our perspective, our investments can only increase as we expect levels to reach $8 billion US by 2019. Permit me, Mr. President, to suggest that our marriage is stable and dependable. The African Development Bank was there for Nigeria when the country faced economic downturn from the recession. I said at the time that Nigeria was too big to fail. The African Development Bank is not a fair weather partner. We were there when it mattered most. For a partner in a time of need, it's a great partner indeed. The African Development Bank approved and disbursed budget support of $600 million to Nigeria as it faced its worst recession in decades. Our support went beyond money. It demonstrated our strong commitment to help to stabilize Africa's largest economy. As my dear sister, the Minister of Finance, Kemi Adeshina, told us last week in Abidjan, when I convened meetings of the African Ministers of Finance, the crucial and timely support of the African Development Bank was what helped Nigeria to be able to come out of this recession. The African Development Bank will certainly not relent in supporting Nigeria in critical areas to boost growth, diversify the economy, and to create jobs. This includes support for youth in agriculture, small and medium-sized enterprises, and the financial sector. We will accelerate support for infrastructure and the energy sector. Our investments are structured around high five priorities: light up and power Africa, feed Africa, industrialize Africa, integrate Africa, and improve the quality of life of the people of Africa. We've invested $500 million in the Development Bank of Nigeria. We expanded private equity investment in agriculture, and it's good to see the Minister of Agriculture who succeeded me here. We put in $80 million into the Fund for Financing Agriculture in Nigeria. This year, we will also be investing $200 million in the Transmission Company of Nigeria to support the rehabilitation of existing transmission lines in partnership with the World Bank. We've invested $100 million in the mainstream power IPP in Jebba and Kainji to add 700 megawatts to the national grid. Thank you. Our private sector investment includes $300 million in Dangote Industries to promote refining of petroleum products and $100 million to support Indorama Fertilizer Company as part of a $1.2 billion syndicated loan that will provide Nigeria with the capacity to produce 1.4 million metric tons of fertilizers and expected to generate $2.1 billion in export earnings over the project life cycle. We've also invested an additional $134 million in Olam in agriculture. We are providing $263 million towards the rehabilitation of basic livelihoods in the northeast of Nigeria, with the expectation of providing water, sanitation, hygiene, and health services that will impact 14 million people, including 1.9 million internally displaced people. Our support of $85 million to the Lekki Concession Company helped construct 50 kilometers of Lekki-Ekpe Expressway. This was the first public-private infrastructure partnership in Nigeria, and we look forward to supporting more in infrastructure in Nigeria. Our support extends to the financial sector, and I see so many of the CEOs of the banks here today. Several Nigerian banks have benefited from $1.8 billion in lines of credit, including Access Bank, Fidelity Bank, Stanbic IBTC Bank, the First Bank, Wema Bank, the Zenith Bank, the GT Bank, the Bank of Industry, the Bank of Agriculture, and also Nexim, among others. Your Excellency, Mr. Vice President, this edifice further beautifies our enormous investments in Nigeria and is very befitting for Nigeria. As you have noticed, the building's color is green. Green means prosperity. It is indeed my prayer that Nigeria itself will prosper and that the African Development Bank will be there always as a strategic partner in Nigeria's prosperity.
President of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akiume Adeshina. But just before we go on the program, let's see what's happening at the crude oil market now. As Brent crude futures are lower today at $68.78 per barrel in early trade, while U.S. crude futures traded at $63.36 a barrel. Traders attribute the lower prices to a recovery in U.S. oil production after a recent drop, as well as by an expected fall in demand when winter ends in the Northern Hemisphere. And that's our program today. Thank you for watching. I am BC Adebayo.